Are we live? Yeah, it says we've gone live. So
Live?
it's Accountability Monday, 7 o'clock.
Monday.
With
Monday
Coxie and
25th.
Rinsley. How you doing?
Easter coming up soon. And then that's it. We're into April then. Gosh.
Just need an accountability on your running, mate. That's all.
I need what? My accountability what?
You're running. So what's happening with your running?
Yeah, I need to run. I need to be running. I don't know what I've done with my ankle, but anyway.
Oh, there we go. Here we go.
It
is this getting in early?
It is. I'll get that one in
Accountability Monday. Remember that, right?
Yeah, but if I've got an injury, I've got an injury.
Of course, yeah. Anyway, what are we going to talk about today?
Well, I thought I'd choose a subject, and you keep going on about all this bloody fact-checking information and the source, not the source of the information. That's not HP or bloody tomato ketchup. So I thought, there's obviously a few people on here, business people and property people and stuff like that. So I suppose I'm, I suppose in the property space, I'm a bit like you actually. When people come to me and say, I've been told this, and this, I'll probably discount most of it. But I just wondered, you're a big fan of this, so I thought I'd throw it over to you to see how you can dissect it and reassemble it, really, so that people can get a couple of takeaways, really.
Okay.
Because we are going to be getting a lot of it. I mean, I think we seen it last week, didn't we, with Kate and the Russians and the Chinese, and it's only going to get more.
Well, was it last week? You was talking about there was a big announcement coming from the palace, and it was out of Russia. They reckon the king was dead and all that shit. So
yeah, but it was a big announcement. They're probably not what everyone thought.
What was the big announcement? Oh, Pat Kate, you mean? Oh, right, okay. Yeah. It was a big announcement. But yeah, I think that's it. So as you chose the subject, I suppose I better go first on what I would do. Because that's what I usually ask you, don't I? It's on the other foot now, isn't it?
Exactly.
On the spot there. Well, I'm gonna run this back to the pandemic years, really, and I'm going to take it right back to. In fact, we was talking about a friend of ours early, Tony Gedge, right? And Tony was very worried and concerned about some little thing that the World Health Organization had cropped up in December 2019 and about this coronavirus, and he said, what do you reckon on that? I said, I don't know. I've not really looked at it, but I'll look into it. And so I did some research at that particular time because the World Health Organization, or what they call it, WHO, were concerned. They were very concerned, and they put alert out, and everyone was like, "Oh, here we go, panic." So I started doing some research well before any information was given to us about virology, generally about viruses, and so I got to look at some information on that. But where do you think I got my information from?
Well, it wouldn't have been the mainstream media.
Well, it certainly wasn't Barry from Bushy on Facebook, was it? Right? So, I'm like
probably Harvard knowing you or something like that.
Harvard. It was actually the Harvard Medical website. Yeah, it was actually, and I studied the virology on their website, and then I looked at, and what came up when I did my research was Spanish flu. So I researched Spanish flu as well, because that's archive records now. So obviously we can look back and it's not someone just reporting something that's false. This is information that was been put up there from many years ago. So I started looking the information and I wanted to know what the world was doing about Spanish flu, not, just generally what it was. And here's the crazy thing. Everyone called it the Spanish flu at the time, because Spain was the first country to come out and said, we've got this problem, because this was in the middle of a world war and it was spreading. It actually originally cropped up in Kansas in the US, but they didn't want to say they had this issue because in the middle of a world war, it might show a bit of weakness to their soldiers. So they didn't say anything. So that was the first reported case, even though it wasn't actually broadcast at the time. So they called it Spanish flu, which it really wasn't Spanish. Should have been Kansas flu. And they put in social distancing. They put people wearing masks. They didn't have the technology at the time to create a vaccine, because That was something that obviously only we could do with modern technology. So I could then look at what was going on. And then I started to look at what the virus was doing at the time. And it was hitting China. China shut everything down. And then it went on to other countries that got affected. And I was watching what they were doing. So I could then start to predict what our government was going to do well before anybody else was talking about it. So this was in January, early February. So we're going to be locked down. I think we had the first case in early February. So we'll be locked down. And if you understand the numbers and you understand how the R rate works, because people are probably aware, they hear of the R rate, and the R rate was down to under 1 in this country. But if you let it rip through the population, the R rate originally was 8, right? So if you could, one person would affect 8 people, right? And then them 8 people would affect another 8 people each. So the numbers would just accelerate. And the reason why we were locked down is because they didn't want that R rate at 8, because it would have overwhelmed our national health system. It would have overwhelmed our, what do they call them, funeral directors and all that stuff. And the vulnerable were the ones that were dying, right? Some with underlying health conditions, hence the reason why they had to shut us down. But I was getting my information from the correct places, not from social media, not from mainstream media, because they were guessing as they went along, right? And look at the misinformation that we got during the pandemic years. And they were polarizing, weren't they? Polarizing. So I only got that information, not because I want to have a row with someone on Facebook or wherever they go to nowadays. I did it so I could prepare my business in the future, so I knew what was going to go on. And I remember having a property meet over in Oxford, and I told them, and it was early part of March, and I said, you're going to be locked down. And there had been no discussions of lockdowns at early March. I said, this is what's going to happen, and the government are going to chuck money at this, and they're going to do this, they're going to do this. And people go, how do you know that? But I could tell from the information I was gathering, the correct information, not a guesswork. So that's where I come from. I always go to a source which is credible, right? Because, and this would make you laugh, right? Yvette, one day, my wife Yvette, our dog had fleas, right? And I did some research on fleas and thought, right, this is going to be a pain in the ass to get rid of. But you had so many conflicting things online. If you look about fleas, and there's so many people writing things, and Yvette's gone, there's this thing you can get, it's called a bomb, and you put it off in their house and it clears everything. Nothing else works. So I said, well, where'd you get that information from? She said, I found it on the internet. So I said, who wrote it? She went, I don't know. I just found it on the internet, right? I found it on the internet, so it's got to be true, and it's got to be, because I've seen it on the internet. And I said, I guarantee they're selling something. She went, no, they wasn't selling anything. I said, I guarantee they were. Anyway, when she went back and checked it, the company was selling the bomb. Oh, actually, this was the company's post they put out, all right? But they were selling the product, and there was a link to the product in their article, and they'd written this article. So it's always... you have to ask yourself, when you get information, 1, who wrote it? 2, why did they write it? 3, is it credible? All right. And 4th, what's their gain for it? What are they going to gain from it if they wrote about it? So these are the things I ask and they look for, and that's just one area. So that gives you a sort of insight into how and also the other thing as well, you can go down numerous rabbit holes when you start doing research, or if you start looking at information you're not sure about it. And that's where I think you have to have a little bit of discipline to say, no, I'm not going to just go off at a tangent and go somewhere, because honestly, the net will take you where it thinks you want to go, because the algorithm is going to throw up all the information it thinks you want, as opposed to what you need. So you have to be aware of how the social media companies and their algorithms can manipulate you or think that's what you want. But go on, what do you do?
Well, yeah, I suppose. I mean, I'll try and distance myself from the source. I suppose I mean, I just cut the source off straight away. So,
That's if you've got false information, you mean?
Well, no. If someone's bringing some information to you, I mean, I like, like you say, if they say, "Oh, this is, like this estate agent said this, or this property source has said this," I mean, I'll be like, I will do a rationale. I mean, obviously in property, sometimes the word's too good. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. It's not a bad starting point. But I think it's healthy to sometimes break the circle. So it's like, it's just picking up a phone. I mean, we're in a very fortunate position now where you can actually pick up the phone, and 15 minutes later or something like that, you've probably had a chat with someone that's got no skin in the game. And they don't know you from Adam, so they don't know where you're coming from. So, and I think the other thing as well is, like, obviously we're entering into sort of like, I suppose we're always in this world where people are looking for where the next strategy or the next trend is coming from, or what's going down. So sometimes I'll probably ignore it until I've heard it from about 3 different sources that are unconnected. So if I'm sort of like, like I was in London, someone mentions X, Y, Z. Let's say, I'm not saying this is it, but let's say someone mentions, short leases. You get into short leases like this, the next best thing to sliced bread. Then if I'm somewhere else and it's like a completely unconnected source, and it's I value the person's opinion, and then suddenly that gets mentioned again, short leases, and if I keep hearing it and it starts to overlay itself, then I'm sort of like, well, actually, I've heard this from 3 different data points. There's something to look into here, and it could be just literally that, you've got the Freehold Reform Act, the Leasehold Reform Bill coming in, goes and working on it, and everyone's looking at, if that's going to make a difference or not. But then, part of me thinks, well, to fiddle with people's freeholds is almost, it's like effectively you're stealing their assets, aren't you, really? So logic will dictate that, well, will they allow things to go through? All this sort of marriage values and stuff like that suddenly go to, there's billions and billions of money tied up in London on freehold, isn't there? So, you've got to perhaps temper it down a little bit. But no, I think the easiest for me is just to go off-piste and just go and ring that sort of area and try and find it myself, really. Because I mean,
one of the things that I'm sort of going to reveal something about myself, really, which is not complimentary. But when I was a kid, I was a naughty kid. I wasn't a well-behaved lad, and so there's an old saying: you can't blag a blagger. And because of the way I was brought up, I had no choice but to blag. So I can see through everything. So I'm naturally, by default, very 2 things. I'm very suspicious of what anyone tells me, and the second, I'm very curious. So that suspicion, well, what do you mean? Who said that? That's the first thing I'm asking. Who said that? So where did you get that information from? And then I'm curious to go and then find that information or dig around, and it comes down to a point, and you'll understand this because you know me well. It's like I've got a point to prove them wrong in a way. Like, you are wrong. This is the correct information. If they're right, I'll give them a pat on the back, right? But it's like, I want to prove you wrong because I don't necessarily believe what everybody tells me. So, and I am absolutely amazed how naive people are. They can be so naive because they've heard it somewhere. They just, oh yeah. And you're right. You could have it from 3 different data points, but you've played that game, Chinese Whispers, haven't you?
Yeah.
We should try it one day, right?
Yeah.
We should try it online, where I'll type something to someone. They're not allowed to copy and paste, and we send a message to 3 or 4 or 5 different people and see what comes back. Because
I think it's. I think
people
so.
always add their little bits, don't they?
Yeah, no, definitely. No, I mean, it's quite funny as well. Social media, I think, social media is that sort of in people's minds. Social media jumps right up the old scale of it's got to be right, isn't it? I mean, that's the frightening thing about it. I mean, I remember this is years ago. I mean, this is like when we were running the Bucks or something like that. So we're probably talking 2000 and before the great financial crisis or around that sort of time. And there was, there's always people posting stuff on Facebook, just sign this like 20 deals up and it was like, and the same person was doing it, just sign this stuff up and I'm just making all this money and just gone and bought myself a Porsche and and I was seeing this and it was a Friday and I thought, I can't resist it. So I just on my Facebook, I just actually posted on my Facebook, I've just done 6 lease options, done two rent to rents, just done a flip and done this, all completely joking. And the way the post was constructed, it was like completely out there. And then I went away into meeting. I come out and when I come out of this meeting after an hour and a half, I had all these congratulation messages and it was like so weird. It's like, oh my word, like this is so false and it's like I was just done it for a bloody Friday laugh. But of course, it's because it's there on social media, people believe it. And I suppose
I saw a post on Instagram, a reel with a truck going across a truck with a train on the back going across the river, and it was clearly AI generated. Clearly, you could tell, right? And the amount of people saying, "Oh, the driver should have a medal for that," and I would suggest it was split 50-50 between naive people believing what they were watching, and the other people going, "Are you thick? Are you stupid? You sure?"
Well, I think there was one like the London Eye was only a temporary project, and we had it on loan from Scotland, and it was being dismantled and sent back to Scotland. And all these people were commenting on it, and you just think, oh gosh. But yeah, I mean, I think sadly it is going to get a lot better, isn't it? And a lot harder, to spot. So people have got to, the elections are coming up. We touched on it before.
But here's another thing, right? And you talk about this, and I suppose this sort of bleeds into it. And I was seeing lots of posts about the government and how bad they are and how terrible this country is, and it's being run terribly. They're all corrupt and all that business, right? And I look back at history and I don't think people are aware of how corrupt MPs used to be. And I think there's a certain amount of corrupt MPs out there, right? But I think there's a lot less than there used to be. So a classic example would be, I don't know if you remember back in the 1980s, we had this massive problem with the Metropolitan Police with corruption. Loads of them got booted out for corruption. I remember one of the guys we used to work with, he got booted out before he got caught. And he said it was rife in the Metropolitan Police, right? Now I know coppers today, quite senior coppers. It doesn't go on like it used to, but people think it still does, and they think politicians are all bent. They all think police are all bent. They think, and the reason why they think it today is because everyone's got a camera. Everyone can snapshot something and put it up on social media. Everyone's got an opinion on something, and they start saying, "Well, yeah, Rishi Sunak is bent, because his family own so and so, and they got all the PP equipment and all that business. So he only did it. He's only in politics because he's feathering his own nest, right?" And I can't see where the evidence is to support that. Yes, there is his company, his father-in-law's company is a very large company, and they probably have got government contracts that were put in place well before he was Prime Minister, right? And they probably do benefit not directly from him, but everyone thinks he's bent. And I look at him and think he's probably one of the least bent politicians I've ever seen in my life. But it's so easy to expose people today. So if something happens, it's immediate, it's everywhere. It's not like the old days where the politicians could suppress the press and say, no, you're not allowed to print that about me. So today they don't care. They don't, and no one cares. Matt Hancock's little affair, and he's with the same woman, by the way. It wasn't just a little affair. It was obviously more than that. But that would have been squashed years and years ago. That would have never have got to print. So things happen in its instant, so it looks worse than it actually is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, and there's always, I mean, like, I think with things like that, it's like, you know, you're talking of like CCTV fitted video that got leaked, isn't there? So there's always someone's got an angle, isn't there? Someone's trying to point score. So, you know, that comes back to, you know, trying to find out.
But they wouldn't have dared do it 30 years ago. They would never, no one would have ever crossed a politician and printed something about them. The press, this is the difference, right? The press 25, 30 years ago had to fact check everything, right? Everything. And so they would never print anything that was not kosher. Today, right, if you don't get your print out, someone will put it on the internet before you, so the story's already out there. So what they do is they push their story out first, then fact check it, and you see it with all these media outlets today. It will say edited on or edited at. So it might have been edited after it was put up because they're afraid of losing the story, so they chuck it up without doing so many fact checks. So we can't rely on the information even from a mainstream media company anymore because they're under pressure to get the story out.
Yeah, and obviously they've all got, you know, like Sky, BBC, they've all got angles to, you know, axes to grind, haven't they?
They've always had angles. The press have always had angles. I mean, it wasn't that long ago where the government were in control of interest rates. It's only Tony Blair that came along and said, you know, we'll give the big Bank of England independence. I mean, how much independence is questionable, but they are independent, and we haven't got politicians making decisions on whether we should or shouldn't raise interest rates, which we shouldn't really have politicians doing that, should we? Right?
Yeah.
So, you know, things have changed a lot in the last 25, 30 years. You know, we've got a different world that we live in, and it's a very much people weren't questioned years ago. They were never questioned. Today, you can question even the King of England is questioned today, whereas 30 years ago, they wouldn't question the royal family in the way they do today. No one gives a monkeys anymore. No one cares.
No, yeah. Well, that's because obviously, you know, where there's a vacuum, they'll put people, the what they call them, trolls and stuff like that, they will fill the vacuum, won't they?
Yeah, I mean, I know we have differences on Prince Harry, but Harry was complaining that even the palace put out press releases or leak stuff to the media to change their narrative of the royal family, or to keep some information away from something else, or they want to, you know, like with Diana, they did it with Diana, you know, disrespecting Diana, pushing things out about her, and he did the same with Harry's wife, because that was his issue, was that it's the same pattern emerging with his mother, which he wanted to protect his family from. So you've got all these things that go on. Whether you disagree is irrelevant, but look what they did to him. Even Piers Morgan knew they hacked his phone. John. They wouldn't have done that 30 years ago. Never. 40 years ago, they'd never done that, would they?
Well, I mean, no. I mean, it's definitely we're in a, you know, everyone's competing for eyeballs, aren't they? I mean, that's what we're in.
And everyone's got an opinion on something, and you look at the polarizing opinion even on just the stuff that we look at on Formula One between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. Everyone's got an opinion on something. If someone's done something, they're guilty, regardless of whether they might be innocent. Do you remember the Cliff Richard scenario? Well, he did to Cliff Richard, right? I mean, he was completely innocent, and like they wrecked his life.
Yeah.
And the one that they should have said things about, Savile, got away with it.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, no, it's a big thing, really. I don't know. I mean, there's obviously some websites in there you can go and it's a fact check website, isn't there? You can
Is
type
there?
it.
Is there? Yeah, that'd be
There's stuff
interesting.
like that
I've
that
used
look
that.
pretty good. And also, I mean, it comes back, isn't it? It's look at, you know, if people are putting information out about, you know, the economy and stuff like that, or, you know, you've only got to see where you know, who's funding them. You know, that's the other thing, is where are they getting their money from?
Yeah.
You know, because I mean, that's a massive thing, isn't it? I mean, you know, if they're being offered lots of money by a certain person or a certain industry, then they're going to toe a certain line, aren't they?
Yeah, but the pharmaceutical industries, and the food industry are both terrible on that, aren't they? Because, you know, the sugar industry wants to protect the sugar industry. The tobacco industry did it for years. In the end, they could not argue about it because the evidence was overwhelming. And it'll get one day. You'll find a lot of industries that we take for granted today will be questioned. Booze industry will be one of them. The food industry will be another, because of their pharmaceuticals as well, because they're pushing their agenda. They're financing the research. I mean, how can you have the body that's going to benefit from the information being towards their narrative, funding the information, funding the research? Yeah, that's wrong, isn't it? It's wrong.
Yeah, well, it was one of the big things with the COVID things, isn't it? Is that they got a lot of government funding, and then they licensed the drug, didn't they? And made obviously quite a lot of money out of it.
It wasn't a drug, was it? It's a vaccine. There's a difference.
Vaccine.
Again, and seriously, I can't stress that one. We're talking about false information. It was never a drug. It was a vaccine. A vaccination is very different to a drug. And people were questioning why. How can you develop because they were calling it a drug in such a short period of time? Well, if you had everybody and his mother working on the same thing with all the funding that you could get, you're going to get a result fairly quickly. And also, because it's a vaccination, what you're doing is effectively giving someone a small bit of the thing that you're trying to protect them from, to create a response in the body to stimulate your immune system. And everyone was saying, well, I got COVID even though I had a vaccination. Well, you are going to get it, but you're not going to get it as bad because you've got some sort of, you know, your body's already primed for it. So it's not going to overwhelm your system like it would do if it just... My missus was out for 4 weeks flat on her back. I had it, didn't even realise that.
Yeah, it's very hard. To see who was going to impact the most on it, really.
Yeah, and so that's a classic example of how that's presented. It's a drug. It's not. It's a vaccine. There's a difference. There's a huge difference. And if you do the research, you'll see that. And people weren't. They were just assuming that this is it because they heard it on Facebook first.
Well, that's the thing. Well, like I said to you the other week, isn't it? A lot of people get their information on TikTok. So,
this is crazy that people get their news off of fucking TikTok, for goodness sake. And the other one, I mean, I do understand that a lot of the news outlets use Twitter. I can't say it.
Well, I think it breaks news. It breaks on Twitter, doesn't it? But then obviously, again, you just have to sample where, is it Reuters? Is it, again, because obviously people are probably reporting. Like the Russian thing, probably, they're probably people putting stuff on Twitter about the Russian attack at the weekend or something, So,
do you know what? I'm going to put this out there. I'm going to put this out there now. I can't see why you cannot have a digital fingerprint or footprint or whatever you want to call it. That if you've got an account, you have to have a biometric proof that that's your account and it's linked to you, as opposed to anyone just setting up an account and doing what they want, because you can set up bots to do it, right?
You can, but obviously the social media companies don't want it, do they?
Well, I think it would be the best thing for social media, because you could be then held account if you're slagging someone off, and I think people would be less likely to slag someone off if there was some redress directly, rather than just a trolled account.
Yeah, no, definitely. There we go.
Out there, that's what we need to do. Should get a petition together and say this is what we want. We want actually accountability online.
Media, they don't seem to want that sucker.
Well, we went off a little bit of piece there, but I think we covered most of it.
Yeah, I think we'll put that. Yeah, definitely. Don't believe what you hear.
No.
See or yeah. So there we go.
Anyway, 7:30 is dinner time for me, but we're back next Monday, 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
And thank you very much. If you've got any ideas that you want us to cover, any accountability ideas, then put some comments in the sections wherever it is, whether it's whichever platform you're listening. Just write some notes in the comments, and then we'll go from there from next time. All right, you take care. See you later. Cheerio. Bye.